Welcome back to Garage and Gadgets. A lot has happened while we've been putting together this AC system. I will get you caught up and kind of recap where we've been so far. But before we get into that, if you like the video, hit like, hit subscribe, tell a friend. I'd really like to see the channel grow and I need your help to do that. Now with that being said, let's show you what has happened off camera and where we're at so far. The first thing I want to show you is the control circuit for the clutch. It has a low pressure switch and a high pressure switch. Now how this works is if the pressure is above 40 psi, this switch will close and allow electricity through. If this pressure sees pressure below 270 psi, it will close and electricity will flow through. So when you turn the AC on, this wire gets 12 volts. It will go through the low pressure switch. If there's enough pressure, it will pass through it. Go to this switch. If the pressure is under its limit, it will pass through, go through the other green wire to the clutch, and the clutch will engage. So that is how the safety circuits work. If the pressure is too low, you could damage the pump. And if the pressure is too high, well, you could damage the pump, rupture a line. There's a lot of bad things that can happen if the pressure gets too high. So you really need to have this safety circuit to govern whether or not the pump should be running. Okay, so let's go over where we've been so far, just in case you didn't see the other videos. If you have seen the other videos on this, I encourage it. Now, this all started with not being able to find the brackets for a big block. I wanted to put the factory R4 compressor in, couldn't find the brackets for it, so I found brackets for a Sandin style compressor. Not a problem. Went and looked for a Sandin style compressor. I chose this 7-piston 150 cc per revolution compressor because it was the closest I could find to the original compressor. So bolted that all up, ran the belt. Well, the belt didn't line up on the power steering pulley, but I looked at it and the power steering pulley wasn't pressed on all the way. Not a big deal. Went and put that pulley fully installed, pressed it on. Okay, well then I looked at it and not nearly enough of the belt was touching the power steering pump pulley for the pump to be properly driven. Okay, so looking at the R10 and experience with other vehicles, I know that there's a pulley for this pump that has 2 belts. And I figured one belt could drive the power steering pump and the other one could be the return for the AC. So I found one. I grabbed one for an 84 Caprice. Okay, got that ordered in, pressed it on. Good, now I got the belt situated. So then I went to pull the radiator to install the condenser, and when I pulled the radiator, most of the cooling fins fell out. All right, better to find this out now than somewhere in Colorado. So went and got myself a replacement radiator. Okay, take the radiator out. Well, now is a good time to look at the coolers. The transmission cooler that's in the truck is still hooked up and working fine. The power steering pump cooler still hooked up, working fine. Cool. The engine oil cooler, somebody had hacksawed off the lines. It must have sprung a leak or had an issue at some point in time and the previous owner removed it. Okay, now we need to replace that because I want as much cooling capability as possible. So I went and got an aftermarket cooler, made up a bracket, mounted it to the radiator core support, got that all situated, put in the condenser. Now because I went with a newer style compressor and I'm going to be running 134A, instead of getting the factory condenser, I went and got myself a parallel flow, which is more suiting to the refrigerant that I'm going to be using. Problem is it's about 3 inches shorter than the factory condenser. Okay, custom brackets. Made custom brackets, put that in, mounted it nice and solid, we're good to go. Put the new radiator in, good to go. That left me with these AC lines. Well, there is no AC lines for this style pump in this vehicle, so I had to go get them custom made. Not a problem. There's a place in town that does that. Got them made. hooked everything up. I hooked up my vacuum pump to pull a vacuum to check for any leaks. Well, 15 minutes go by, no leaks. Half hour goes by, no leaks. Looking good. 45 minutes, no leaks. Perfect. Got distracted doing other things, cleaning up. And, well, then I come back about a half hour later from the last time I checked it. No vacuum. Something failed. All right, no big deal. Start checking O-rings and connections. And when I got to the compressor, I found that the compressor itself failed. The casting broke. All right, disappointing, but hey, manufacturing things happen. So I call up where I bought it from, told them what had happened. They said, no problem, we'll ship you out a replacement. Cool. The replacement came in a couple days ago, and I installed it. Everything went fine. Hooked up all the lines, hooked everything back up, put a vacuum to the system, and for 2 hours it held vacuum perfectly. I said, all right, good. And that's when I started doing the wiring. Wired up the switches I just explained to you about, and wired up the clutch. Now the clutch has 2 wires from the factory. There's a ground and a signal, which is just the 12 volts from the switch. Now the compressor is grounded via the brackets and everything, but I connected the ground wire as well, because anybody who's worked on vehicle wiring knows how bad a bad ground can get. So the compressor is properly grounded and has signal. It is ready to go. Unfortunately, the rest of the vehicle isn't. So here's where we're at. The radiator is still drained because I haven't filled it back up. So we need to put coolant in it. And the power steering pump was drained from when I had to fuss with it. So we need to fill up those 2 fluids before we can run the engine to charge the AC system. And I still need to hook up the engine oil cooler. So that's what we'll do now. How the kit for the engine oil cooler works is you will remove the oil filter and it gets inserted there. So there's a plate that bolts in where your oil filter goes, and it will redirect the oil to the cooler and then back again, and then your filter bolts to the bottom of that plate. So we'll have to install that plate, a couple hoses, a couple clamps to keep everything secure, and then we'll be good to go. And seeing how I'm pulling the filter off, seems like a good time to do an oil change. With all of that said, let's get started. Well, welcome back to our favorite place underneath one of my vehicles. Seeing how we're going to be messing with the oil system, I figured it'd probably just be best to do an oil change while we're at it. So let's start with draining the oil. Hopefully this goes easier than what we had on the other truck, where both these bolts were tightened by Thor. But let's get this oil out of here. I'm going to set this here where I'll never make a mess. I am going to go top side and pull the cap off so we don't create a vacuum. Meanwhile, this will hopefully drain into the tank. Yeah, okay. It was filling up faster than it was going in, but let's let that pour. Let's continue our mess and see if this will actually work. I've never gotten one of these to work. Hey, don't run away from me. But let's see if I get lucky this time. Oh my goodness, it did. Look at that. Okay, and here comes the oil from that running down my hand and everywhere else. Great. I love when things get covered in oil and slippery. And how long is this thread? Okay, I'll take this and put that there and go clean my hands because ick. Meanwhile, we'll let that continue to drain. I'm also kind of planning and looking at how we're going to route these hoses. Maybe we can get lucky and put them somewhere where they're not going to get themselves in trouble. All right, I'll be right back. Oh, hi. Looks like everything's done draining. So let's put the plug back in and we can tighten that up and we could start working on this adapter. We'll snug this up. All right. So that is now done. So what we have is this piece here. Now this piece here goes where your oil filter goes and has these two connections to connect to the cooler in and out. And then your oil filter connects here. Now to do this, you have this piece here. This slides through the center and threads where your oil filter would thread, and then this seals like the seal on your oil filter. And on the flip side, it gives you a place for your oil filter to thread and a place for your oil filter to seal. So that is what we will install next. I'm going to take this gasket out. I'm going to attempt to take this gasket out because I want to give it a little bit of oil just to kind of help it out a little bit. So luckily I have a bunch of oil right here. Figure out how we want this. So obviously you don't want these ports to be facing the exhaust. So we're going to try to aim it forward. Hey, I'm attached to the truck now. All right. Now where does all this go? This goes there. So I'm just going to put this on just tight enough to snug it. And we'll try to figure out a good clocking position. I think just straight forward is going to be the best option, because that will give us the ability to go just straight shot to the cooler. I'm thinking where the frame, cross member, and motor mount kind of make this little pocket that might be a nice safe place to hold that line, and then we can worry about attaching it down up by the radiator. But for right now, we're gonna do this, and looks like we should have plenty of clearance from exhaust. We should have plenty of clearance from the oil pan, and we can kind of just snake it down and through. All right, now I'm gonna take this back off and I'm gonna put the two hose barbs on it. Okay, now with the two barbs attached, we are going to put this officially on there. So again, this thread's where your oil filter would normally go. And let's not have the barbs up against the flywheel. That might make some noise. Okay, that is tight enough. Well, hopefully that didn't shift or move. No, we should be good. Have these come out. We got about an inch from everything. All right. So now, before we throw the oil filter on, let's run the hoses, and hopefully I have enough hose. So, with hose clamps and a nut driver, let's see if we can get this figured out. Put it this way so that we have that clamp there. Let's see if I can see it. All right. Slide this on. That's on all the way. Now, when you put a clamp on, you don't want it right at the edge of the hose. You want it back, 3/8 of an inch, 1/4 of an inch, somewhere around there. If you're in the land of metrics, say 3 to 7 millimeter. But I'm gonna say right about there. Now where's my this? Let's tighten this down. All right, That should be good enough for that one. Now, let's set this one this way, slide this on. It's a little closer to the exhaust manifold than I would want it to be, but I think it's going to be okay. Famous last words. Ouch. There we go. Can I get my hand up in here? Come on. Go on there. Something you can use to help hoses going on is just a little bit of dish soap. Can sometimes help them slide on. Alright, now where did my clamp go? Oh, it went for a little joyride. Come back here. Alright. That should be plenty tight. I'm going to get that out of there. Alright, I'm going to clean this up. Check to see if the hose is going to be long enough. If it is, we'll put the oil filter on. Alright, we have our new Wix filter, date and mileage on it. Now, seeing how we are planning on doing a couple 1,000-mile trip, mileage is not all that important because we'll be doing an oil change almost immediately, if not halfway through this trip. So, with all that being said, I'm going to oil this gasket and we're going to put it in. Now, normally I fill up the filter before I put it in, but because we have all this extra lines and everything, what I'm going to do is I'm going to disconnect the distributor and we're going to crank over the engine to fill up everything. And once we have good pressure, then we'll start it. So, just a little extra oil on the seal and we will thread this on. Okay, under the front of the vehicle, we have the cooler that we mounted previously, and we have our hose. Now we need to find out where the middle of that hose is, which is going to be right about there, and we're going to have to cut the hose at that spot. So I'll make a mark, and let's cut this hose. So we'll have one go to one side of the cooler, the other go to the other side of the cooler. We will put clamps down on it. Trying to think which way would be the best. Probably that way. All right, let's hook this up. All right, both of those seem to be pressed on about an inch. Let's see if we can get these clamps in place, tighten down. All right, that one's tight. Let me see if I can get this one any tighter. And then I want to see if we can mount these in some way. Let's start with that spot right here. If I can get a zip tie to come up and over, I think we should be pretty good. Let's zip tie one of these hoses there. Alright, that should keep the cooler out of trouble. Should keep this hose out of trouble for the most part. Oh, I got another big zip tie. Can I get it? Can I get the zip tie to go through there? Oh, I can. Yes, that works perfectly. Let's go take this. And is this long enough? Not even closely long. Well, I'll take that back. It may be formally just long enough. Oh, look at that. It's almost like I know what I'm doing here. So, let's go through a checklist. We had the new filter installed, we had the drain plug installed, we had the lines tightened down at the filter side, we just finished tightening down the lines at the cooler side. So that circuit should be complete. Our radiator hoses are all tightened, our transmission hoses are all tightened. AC, I already checked that off camera, should still have a vacuum in it. We have tightened down our reservoir for a power steering pump. So now we are ready to start putting in fluids. So let's start with the oil, and then we can go to coolant and power steering. We'll crank the engine without having power going to the coil, so it doesn't actually fire up. I just want it to build up oil pressure and flush out all of the air that's in this new circuit. So let's go get the oil. For the oil, we're going to use Rotella 1540. It's a little bit thicker than the 1030, but this engine also has 200-something thousand miles on it. I don't think it's going to care much. Plus, this oil, yes, it's a diesel oil, but it also has all of the zinc and other additives that a flat tappet engine of this vintage needs. So let's go and put it in. Now, I've bought a lot of oil because I'm not quite sure with the addition. Let's see how good I do with a sky pour. Oh, we're doing good so far. With the addition of the new cooling circuit, I'm not quite sure how much oil it's going to be, but I can guarantee you it's going to be at least a gallon. So that is 1 gallon down, and we'll give that a second. We'll check the dipstick, and then we'll do a little more. All right, we are about halfway through add and full, so we'll pour a little bit more, hopefully, into the engine this time. And we'll go from there. Hopefully it says we're a little bit over full, because that's going to be what's going to go into the system, and we are over full. But we still need to fill up the filter and that additional cooling circuit. Now, like I said, to do that, I'm going to disconnect the power to the coil. Okay, with the power disconnected to the coil, I'm going to crank the engine over and watch for oil pressure. It's probably going to take a little while for it to do it, which is why I didn't want it to start up. Well, after a lot of cranking, we finally made oil pressure. We also made an oil leak, so we'll have to go back underneath the vehicle and address that. Looks like one of the fittings that threads into that adapter plate didn't get tight enough, so we'll address that. But let's see what the oil level is at now that we have oil throughout the entire system. We are right at, if not a little bit above, the full line, so that worked out quite well. Okay, well, let's get back underneath the vehicle and fix that oil leak. Welcome back. It's the next day. Off camera, I crawled underneath the truck, took those two fittings out, sealed them up, put them back in, turned the engine over. We got to our 30, 45 PSI of oil pressure, no leaks. I also added in some abrasion wrap on the two oil lines so that they don't wear a hole when sitting up against frame rails or anything else. So now that those lines are protected and not leaking, we can get back to filling up the rest of the fluids. What I'm also going to do real quick, just to double check everything, is I'm going to put the 12 volts back to the coil. We're going to fire up the engine for just a short bit because there's no coolant. But I want to just make sure that with normal engine oil pressure, there's no leaks. So let's go do that now. All right, we got full oil pressure. and no leaks. Nothing dripping back here. Nothing dripping up here. All right, good. With no leaks at the filter end or at the cooler end, we are ready to start filling up the other fluids. Once we have the system burped, we can go pull a vacuum on the AC, which should hopefully still have some of a vacuum. Once we've pulled a vacuum, we could start filling the AC, and you'll be able to see the low pressure switch at work, and hopefully this compressor will kick on. So let me go get the antifreeze. We'll start with that. Okay, for antifreeze we have O'Reilly's pre-diluted, and we'll try for the Sky Pour. Now this radiator is brand new, so it's also completely empty. So we also have to refill what we lost coming out of the hoses. One gallon down, no leaks at the bottom, so we are good to pour in our other bottle. I'm going to leave a little bit of room for churn, but now that we have coolant, we'll add a little bit of power steering fluid so we don't run the pump dry, and start it up, burp the system. Actually, let's leave that off for now. Now, I originally bought a gallon of fluid because I planned on adding a cooler, but seeing how the cooler already existed and was in working order, won't be needed. So we will fill up what we need and then put the rest on the shelf. Okay. Boy, I really overfilled this. Overfilled. Not overfilled. That's how much I overfilled it. I overfilled it. Perfect. I don't know how I managed after all that to hit the line perfectly. All right. Let me clean up the mess that I made, and we will start it up and go. Now with the power steering pump full and the radiator needing to be refilled just from sitting here, it is time to start this up and purge the cooling system of air. So let's start it up. Got another bottle of antifreeze ready. Where are we at here? It's fairly stable. While this is warming up, we did drain the power steering pump full of fluid. So I'm going to take the steering wheel and rock it back and forth to purge all the air out of that system that we may have introduced. All right, with that system purged, we just need to keep an eye on the coolant. Once that thermostat opens up, the level's gonna drop, we'll have to add more in. Until then, it's just monitor and make sure everything's good. The engine's temperature has dropped back down to normal and the radiator is flowing pretty good. I'm gonna top this off and we may add a little bit into the bottle. Right here's the high point in the cooling system. So I'm squeezing it, trying to push any air bubbles that may be in it to get forced out. So top up this, pour a little bit in there, cooling system will be done. So I've shut the truck off for this part. It doesn't need to be running. What we're going to do is pull a vacuum in the system. I have my vacuum pump and gauges hooked up. When I hooked the gauges back up, there was still a vacuum. Now it wasn't as strong of a vacuum as I left it, but it still had a vacuum, and that vacuum was probably lost from me disconnecting the lines. So with that being said, I'm going to turn the pump back on and we'll watch for the vacuum being drawn and hopefully held. High pressure side's already under a vacuum. Low pressure side is slowly coming down to -30 inches of mercury. So once that hits that -30, we will start a clock, let it sit under a vacuum for a little bit. Then we'll clamp this off and see if it holds the vacuum. Now, in the past, when I've done this, the only time I've ever had a problem with the fitting is with the R12 to 134A adapters. I had issues with this adapter that I have on the low side once before. Trying it again with a little bit tighter this time. Maybe I didn't have it tight enough. In any case, we'll see. Once the timer goes off, I'll know it's been under a vacuum for long enough that everything is out of the system. I will clamp off the valves, turn off the vacuum pump, and then we'll see. We'll see if it holds vacuum. If it holds vacuum, we're good. We can charge the system. If not, we'll have to figure out what it is. Since I already know the system holds vacuum, it would have to be that fitting there. We'll pull the fitting, check it again, and if it holds vacuum, then I will have to get an adapter for the 134A to fit onto my my gauges, and we'll just charge through that. In any case, time will tell. Okay, so it's been 15 minutes under vacuum. I'm going to close these two valves, and then we'll see how long it holds. If it holds for a half hour, then we know we're good and we can start up the engine and start filling up the system. So I'm going to turn these, close the valves, take a quick look at where the needles are, turn off the pump. With that, I'll set a timer for 30 minutes and we'll see you then. All right, it's been 30 minutes, no vacuum pump, just the system on its own, and we are at -30 PSI on both sides. That means we are good to charge this system. Now I'm going to do this a little bit different because you've seen my garage. I can't for the life of me find my 134A can taps so I can use the gauges. What I'm going to do is I'm going to disconnect the low side, and that is where I will hook my can to, and then I will monitor the high pressure side just to keep eyes on things. So we'll use the gauge that's on the can for the low side and this gauge for the high side. But first, I got to disconnect some stuff and then start the engine. Okay, this is the AC charge that we're going to be using. Now, somewhere in your engine compartment will be a little label that'll tell you how much you need to use. Normally 1 can will be fine because you're not starting with an empty system. This is a completely empty system. It's been under a vacuum and still currently is. So for me, it's on the AC condenser housing over there, and it's 3.5 pounds. This can is 22 ounces, so I'm going to need a couple cans to fill this system up. Another thing to keep in mind, if you've never done this before, read the instructions. This can is under pressure and can be dangerous. Also, when you get it, it's threaded onto the gauge and it is sealed. You have to take this little red plug out. And what this plug does is it protects the gauge and the can from going, because once you thread this onto the can, it punctures the seal, and if you were to take this off, it sprays Freon and all kinds of chemicals all over the place. So once this attaches to this, you do not disconnect it until this can is absolutely empty. With that, I am going to thread this on there, start the truck, and turn on the AC to AC max. Then connect this to the low pressure side, hit the trigger. What you'll see is once the system hits 40 psi on the low pressure side, which we'll see on this gauge, the compressor should kick on and immediately kick back off because it's just going to suck everything to the high pressure side. As we fill the system, the compressor will run for longer and longer and longer times, and once we have the system completely full where the pressure is where we want it to be on the low pressure side and safely on the high pressure side, we'll be good to go. All right, here's the gauge for the low pressure side and the gauge for the high pressure side. Once this hits 40 or into that green area, this should start to spin. Now you're going to want to hit the trigger with this in the vertical orientation and then occasionally tip it over, because this is filled with both gas and liquid. Here we go. All right, as you're filling, you won't see anything on this gauge, but you can see the high pressure side is slowly filling up. And there you go. The compressor just kicked. Right now, the low pressure switch is kicking on, allowing the compressor to go. But then because the system is so low on pressure, the pressure on the low side drops below and it turns off the compressor. Okay, we're getting to the point where the can is pretty cold and I don't feel anything sloshing around. That tells me this can is empty. So I'm going to disconnect it from the low pressure side, swap out the can. Okay, so AC is set to max, cold, and the fan is all the way up. The compressor is running and we're seeing the low side drop and the high side go up. That's good, that's what we want. Let's let it run for a little bit and see what it does. It should be good where it's at now. Looking at the pressures, now it's been running for a little bit. The low side is sitting at about 40 and the high side is about 270. That is exactly where we want it to be. The pump is running solid. The belt is a little bit loose, so we'll have to adjust that. But the system seems to be working exactly how we want it to be. The low pressure line is getting cold to the touch. Let's let it run. I'm gonna go take a peek at what the temperature coming out of the vent is. So, quick update. We're sitting at about 30, 35 PSI on the low side. We're creeping up to 300 on the high side. It's a little bit high on the high side, but we are seeing 50 degrees at the vent on an 80-degree day. That's pretty decent air conditioning. I'm gonna let it run for a little bit longer, but I don't see the need to have to add anything, which makes sense based off of the sticker that was on the system and how much we put in. All right, so the system is running steady. Pump has not been turning on and off like it was when we were charging it. I think everything is where we want it to be. The high pressure side is creeping up there, but we're not driving, we're just sitting here. So we're not getting that airflow through the condenser that you would if you were driving down the freeway or, well, just driving in general. So what I think I'm gonna do is I'm gonna shut off the truck, let the pressure stabilize so I can safely disconnect my gauges, and then go take it for a drive. See if we can get another 10 degrees out of the vents by just getting more airflow through the engine. I'll let you know when I get back. Well, I just got back from a quick drive. We got our extra 10 degrees, so we are now sitting at about 40 degrees under ambient air temperature. I think that should do us well when we're in Arizona. So now it's just move on to the next part of this little project, getting this truck ready. And when we go to do that, I'll see you then.